Question: what do Tommy Shelby, Walter White, the people of Gaza, and the people of Japan all have in common? Let's watch this video to find out. As a Gen Xer, I grew up watching and loving quite a few psychopaths on TV. Now where do I begin? John Rambo, John McClane in Die Hard, Martin Riggs in Lethal Weapon, and the list goes on. These characters were so captivating back in the day that they became huge and successful franchises. Parental guidance, my foot. The reason I said psychopaths in the beginning is that all of them had a screw loose one way or another. You know, in the days when being crazy was cool. If you think about it, all of them suffered trauma in their stories, which then led to their unique characters, hence our entertainment. I'm going to explain how these characters from fiction suffered PTSD and how that affected how they thought and behaved. Understanding this will help us understand what the people in the areas of conflict in the Middle East are going through. By understanding their experience, maybe, just maybe, we can figure out a way for them to recover, and God willing, even thrive when this madness is all over. And so the millennials and Gen Zs who are watching can relate to this. I'll choose more recent productions like Peaky Blinders and Breaking Bad. Let me get into this while I still have your attention. According to the American Psychiatric Association, PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is defined as a mental health disorder that can develop after exposure to a traumatic event, such as combat, natural disasters, serious accidents, or sexual assault. The primary symptoms of PTSD include intrusive thoughts, nightmares, flashbacks, emotional numbness, hypervigilance, and avoidance of situations that remind the individual of the traumatic event. The condition can seriously affect a person's daily life, relationships, and ability to function effectively in society. The severity and duration of PTSD can vary, but without appropriate treatment, the disorder can become chronic and debilitating. In this video, I'll be explaining only a few examples of what a person suffering PTSD goes through, as I am not an expert on the matter, but hopefully we can learn something together and from each other. When Thomas, or Tommy Shelby, the main character in Peaky Blinders, returned home at the end of World War I, arguably the most senseless mass loss of soldiers in history, reaching between 9 to 11 million military personnel. But while the body count of modern-day combat has reduced, the psychological impact is just as destructive. Tommy Shelby exhibits several symptoms of PTSD throughout the series, and here are some examples. Tommy often experiences vivid flashbacks to the time in the trenches during World War I. He also has frequent nightmares, particularly about the horrors he saw, which disrupt his sleep and cause him to wake up in distress. We saw this several times in different seasons. The fatigue took a big toll on his mind and body. Now imagine what a child in Gaza is witnessing every day. Imagine the horror and the mental and physical exhaustion they must be going through. Let me continue. He's always on high alert and aware of his surroundings, even in relatively safe environments. This constant state of vigilance is a common symptom of PTSD. This is often seen when he's quick to react to perceived threats, even if they aren't immediate. Now imagine a mother in any current area of conflict, waking up in the middle of the night, that's if she got any sleep at all, to make sure her kids are safe in an unsafe environment. Imagine how paranoid she is. It'll drive anyone crazy. Next. Tommy exhibits frequent bouts of irritability, anger, and aggression. His violent behavior, impulsive decisions, and outbursts are partly driven by his inability to cope with his trauma. For example, he often lashes out at those around him, including family members. In Gaza, you have drones buzzing overhead 24/7 that can strike at any moment. I personally snap at my kids sometimes when they're being too loud. There's no comparison. Now, in Breaking Bad, although Walter White doesn't have a formal PTSD diagnosis in the show, his actions can be analyzed through a similar lens, especially related to the traumatic news of his cancer diagnosis and the pressures that follow. Over time, Walter becomes emotionally detached, not just from the criminal consequences of his actions, but also from the harm he causes to the people around him. His trauma and fear of dying without leaving a legacy cause him to compartmentalize his actions, numbing his sense of guilt or remorse. As Walter becomes more involved in the drug trade, he rationalizes his increasingly violent actions, such as ordering the deaths of his rivals, because he sees it as necessary for his family's survival. His sense of morality fades as he avoids confronting the full impact of his choices. So today, in the areas of conflict, imagine losing everything that you worked your entire life trying to build. In addition, losing your family and everyone you've ever known. Streets look different now. Your favorite shops don't exist anymore. Everything you've known your whole life is just a memory now. I think emotional numbness is an understatement. Before his cancer diagnosis, Walter feels powerless and unappreciated, stuck in a low-paying teaching job and unable to fully support his family. This low self-esteem is amplified by his diagnosis, leading to choices aimed at claiming a sense of power and worth. Walter's decision to build a meth empire stems from the desire to prove his worth, not just financially, but as a man of significance. His growing sense of inadequacy lead him to make choices that feed his ego, such as rejecting the financial help from his former business partners, Gretchen and Elliot, in favor of continuing his dangerous path. So tell me, how powerless do you think the people of Gaza feel today? Walter's traumatic experiences, including the many deaths and moral compromises he witnesses, gradually change his decision-making process. As the series progresses, Walter's choices become less about providing for his family and more about maintaining his power, as the trauma reshapes his priorities. Here's a final example. As Walter's empire grows, his ability to trust others diminishes, leading to paranoia and further isolation. His ability to trust those around him, such as his partner Jesse, his wife Skylar, or even his brother-in-law Hank, causes him to make decisions that sabotage his relationships and leave him alone at the end. Now that we got a clearer picture of what people suffering from PTSD go through, let's take a closer look at the people of Gaza. Gaza has been the epicenter of conflict for decades, and the repeated cycles of violence, displacement, and economic instability have had profound effects on its population. The inhabitants of Gaza, including children, women, and men, are frequently exposed to traumatic events such as airstrikes, house demolitions, and the loss of loved ones. Such exposure to continuous and severe trauma has led to high rates of PTSD among the population. A study conducted in 2013 revealed that around 54% of children in Gaza showed symptoms of PTSD, indicating the severe psychological impact of the ongoing conflict. For individuals in Gaza, PTSD manifests as persistent anxiety, fear, depression, and difficulty in maintaining normal social relationships. Symptoms such as flashbacks and nightmares can disrupt daily routines, making it challenging for individuals to participate in activities that they previously enjoyed. In such cases, individuals may also experience substance abuse as a coping mechanism, leading to further health complications. The pervasive sense of insecurity and unpredictability exacerbates the mental health crisis, as these individuals live in a state of heightened alertness and fear. PTSD affects not only individuals, but also their families. The psychological burden of living with someone who has PTSD can lead to increased stress and anxiety for family members. In Gaza and Arab culture in general, the family unit often acts as the primary support system. But when multiple family members are affected by trauma, the capacity to provide emotional support diminishes. This can lead to strained relationships, domestic violence, and a breakdown of the family structure. Children are particularly vulnerable, as they are often witness to violence and may struggle to understand the behavior of their traumatized parents, leading to intergenerational transmission of trauma. Let that sink in for a moment. I can't help but think of the future. What will happen to these societies after this nightmare is all over? The high prevalence of PTSD in Gaza affects society at large. A society where a significant portion of the population suffers from untreated PTSD may experience reduced productivity, increased violence, and strained healthcare systems. Education systems are also affected, as children with PTSD may struggle with concentration and learning, impacting their academic performance. The stigma associated with mental health disorders further complicates access to care, as individuals may avoid seeking help for fear of social exclusion. The economic impact is also significant, as the healthcare sector grapples with limited resources to address the growing mental health needs. Being the hopeful person that I am, I can't help but wonder, how will the region rebuild itself? I wanted to take an example of an existing society that overcame mass tragedy and thrived. I couldn't find an example better than Japan after World War II. After World War II, Japan faced immense devastation. The destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, coupled with widespread damage across the country, left millions of people traumatized. The end of the conflict also marked the loss of a way of life, as Japan transformed from an imperial nation to a democracy under Allied occupation. The trauma experienced by Japanese citizens was not just due to the physical destruction, but also the psychological impact of defeat and the fear of an uncertain future. This trauma manifested in various ways. Survivors, known as haibakusha, experienced severe psychological and physical health issues, including PTSD. Many survivors struggled with feelings of guilt, fear, and anxiety, which were compounded by social stigma. The fear of radiation effects led to discrimination against the haibakusha, who were often ostracized in the communities and faced difficulties in finding employment and marriage partners. Families in post-war Japan faced significant challenges, including loss of income, housing, and social status. Many families were separated during the conflict, and reunions were often marked by grief for lost members. PTSD in individuals affected family dynamics, leading to communication breakdowns and emotional distance. However, the strong cultural emphasis on resilience and collective effort helped families to rebuild and support each other. The Japanese concept of gaman, which refers to enduring difficult situations with patience and dignity, played a significant role in helping individuals cope with their trauma. Japan faced a monumental task of rebuilding not only its infrastructure but also its social fabric. The Allied occupation implemented various reforms that led to significant changes in Japanese society, including land reforms, educational restructuring, and the introduction to democratic governance. Despite these changes, the mental health crisis was not immediately addressed, as the focus was on economic recovery and physical reconstruction. Over time, however, Japan was able to create a robust healthcare system that included mental health services, although the stigma around mental illness remained a barrier to care. The experiences of Gaza and post-war Japan illustrate the profound impact of prolonged trauma on individuals, families, and societies. In both cases, the trauma was pervasive, affecting every aspect of life. However, there are notable differences in how the two regions have dealt with PTSD. In Gaza, the ongoing nature of the conflict means that there is little room for the population to recover from trauma. The lack of stability, coupled with limited access to any healthcare services, amplifies the crisis. In contrast, Japan after World War II was able to gradually shift from a state of crisis to one of recovery. The end of the conflict marked the beginning of a period of reconstruction, during which the Japanese government, with the support from the Allied forces, was able to rebuild infrastructures, economy, and society. The concept of gaman helped individuals endure hardships, while community support played a huge role in the healing process. Additionally, the Japanese government introduced policies and facilitated economic growth, which in turn improved the overall well-being of the population. But just like gaman in Japan, the people of Gaza have a religious belief called sabr and thabat, which translates into patience and perseverance when facing any ordeal. And I believe that this is what led many people around the world to convert to Islam after seeing how strong the people of Gaza were and still are. It's as if they had their own superpowers through their faith. In Japan, cultural values and government policies played a significant role in shaping the recovery process. Cultural values such as perseverance, collective effort, and respect for authority helped foster a sense of unity and purpose. The government's focus on economic recovery and normalization created employment opportunities, which helped individuals in Japan regain a sense of stability and normalcy. In Gaza, the situation is more complex due to the ongoing conflict, political instability, and economic blockade. While cultural values such as resilience and family solidarity are present, like we all have seen, the lack of stable government and continuous conflict hinders efforts to address the mental health crisis effectively. International humanitarian organizations play a crucial role, but their efforts are often limited by the political situation. The post-war recovery of Japan offers valuable lessons for addressing PTSD in conflict-affected areas in the Middle East. One of the key elements of Japan's recovery was the establishment of a stable government that prioritized economic recovery and social welfare. The government's investment in healthcare, education, and infrastructure helped to create a sense of hope and stability, which is essential for mental health recovery. In Gaza, similar efforts would require not only international support, but also political stability and peace. Efforts to address PTSD must include a comprehensive approach that combines mental health care, economic support, and social cohesion initiatives. Another important lesson is the role of community support and cultural resilience. In Japan, community-based initiatives, including mutual aid associations and neighborhood groups, helped to provide social support to individuals dealing with trauma. Encouraging similar community-based approaches in the Middle East could help alleviate the psychological burden on individuals and families. and we already saw many cases where people took in families who lost their homes. Moreover, reducing the stigma associated with mental health disorders is essential for encouraging people to seek help without fear of social exclusion. PTSD is a complex and debilitating disorder that affects not only individuals, but also their families and society as a whole. The experiences of the Middle East and post-war Japan illustrate the profound impact of trauma and the challenges of recovery. While the situation here remains serious due to the ongoing conflict, the recovery of Japan after World War II demonstrates that it is possible to overcome the effects of PTSD with the right combination of cultural resilience, government support, and community-based initiatives. Addressing PTSD in conflict in different regions requires a holistic approach that considers the unique social, cultural, and political context of each region. Only by addressing these underlying issues can sustainable solutions be developed to support mental health recovery and promote long-term peace and stability. I want to make a shout out to my son Abdullah for helping me with the content for this video. So if you enjoyed watching this, make sure you thank him as well. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe.